I mentioned at the outset this what I call a policy drift in Ottawa. Then again, you can say that the Trudeau government is just carrying out what they campaigned on. I don't know what grade you would give the last federal budget in February. I don't know if I would even give it a passing grade. Like, do we operate, I mean, I would ask the group, do we, the crowd, do we operate in some sort of a vacuum? That we have like a few months to prepare? I mean, this is basically, like, think of this budget, right? 369 pages. This is page 296. This is the only mention of what happened in the US, which, by the way, you told me at lunch was a game changer for Canada. One sentence. Over the coming months, the Department of Finance will conduct detailed analysis of the U.S. federal tax reforms to assess any potential impacts on Canada. And of course, I'm going to ask Craig Wright, who's an expert on fiscal policy, and of course, you know, the Royal Bank's got a lot of contacts in Ottawa. For the first time in decades, the net effective tax rate in the U.S. is lower than it is in Canada. We've lost a huge competitive advantage. And one sentence in the budget 3 months later. So I guess the question I was asking you is, what's the bank and what's your role going to be, and what will you advise the federal government going to next year's budget? And do you think that next year we will shift away from populism towards competitiveness, in your opinion? This is going to be right before the next election. What are your thoughts?
We do have contacts at finance, but they're not allowed to talk to me anymore because I'm considered a fiscal hawk. And a fiscal hawk in this environment is somebody that wants a balanced budget at some point in your lifetime. So right now, the focus is on redistribution, not growth. And the point, and we do these meetings with finance ministers a couple times a year, and the rules of engagement are you can say what you say, you can't say what anybody else said, and I know others have been in these meetings as well, so I'll leave it to them to comment. But so I think you're being generous that they had 3 months to look at this. This was something that myself and others mentioned a year ago in the last run-up to the last budget, because Trump came in on a platform that looked pretty likely that he was going to cut personal taxes, cut corporate taxes, lighter regulatory touch, and lighter carbon touch. And so we're warning, saying competitiveness challenge, let's get in front of this and not react to it. And then a year later, the U.S. didn't do anything, but we still saw an erosion of our competitiveness because we raised corporate taxes, raised personal taxes, and carbon pricing has been a cash cow for the provinces. And then we got some minimum wage issues in that too. The challenge is if you're committed to spending, you don't have room for a competitiveness budget because it's going to cost you tax dollars. When you look at the relative competitiveness, you can look at a number of different indicators, but foreign direct investment into Canada in the fourth quarter last year was levels we have not seen since the global financial crisis. So people aren't investing here. And so I'd be more bullish if we saw some of these other investment numbers turn around. And I think the challenge is it's a commitment to spending. We saw that with the last budget. The infrastructure program got pushed out. We had better numbers on the growth side. So they had about a $10 billion room to play, could have booked a lower deficit, set you on a better path for a balance, and it was all spent. And that's the environment we're in, and as we go forward, that looks like the only benchmark that you mentioned, fiscal, I mean, it's unanchored. They target our debt to GDP, which you have no control over GDP, and it encouraged pro-cyclical behavior. So
I just want to come back. You said that you can't spend more and cut taxes, but that's exactly what they're doing in the States. They are spending more. So I'm not pro-government spending, okay? At least not wasteful spending. But if the U.S. doesn't care about the deficit and they could finance it, are we going to be like holier than thou and we're going to focus on the deficit? Well, the U.S. isn't. The U.S. is spending, cutting taxes, and we're going to increase spending. But I don't see why there's any logic as to why we couldn't cut taxes at the same time, so long as we can fund the deficits. Anyway, let me open it up for the group for any comments or what you're hearing.
Of course, in the U.S. it's front-loaded. They will pay for it heavily come 2019, 2020. We know that. But absolutely right. In the short term, I think that we are losing this game.
But you're a North American business, or you're a global business doing business in Canada, and all of a sudden you are incentivized for the first time to book your revenues in the United States. So the capital investment and the jobs, well, this is going to come down to your housing call because we know what a fifth of the economy is in the GTA nationally. The one thing I didn't understand, and Craig, you didn't bring it up, was the simplest thing they could have done. Simplest thing that would have cost them nothing, which is the full year depreciation allowance. Why not just go there?
They're studying
Right? Pardon me?
They're studying it.
Oh, they're studying it. That's what I mean. You see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They're studying it. But I guess the question I would also have, because have you met Morneau and you've met Trudeau? You met both. Like, do you get a sense that is there a difference between Morneau you meet in private and the Morneau that you see in public?
No, but I think that I think it's fair to say, and I met Trudeau, and he cannot say two sentences without the term middle class in the middle. No, he does believe that that's the case, and I totally agree that we want to live the middle class.
Even, when you think about even cutting corporate taxes, I guess you can't do that in Canada. But what, Doug, corporate taxes account for what out of the total revenue base? Is it even 10%?
No.
Like, it would cost them next to nothing. It just seems as though it wouldn't be part of their populist strategy.
And in terms of the deficit versus taxes, I totally come down on your side. Given the hand we've been dealt, I think we have no choice. And it's almost like spending is fixed. But I think, given, are we looking at, a bigger deficit and lower taxes? Yes, I would take that option at this point, because I don't think we have a lot of choice. I go with the federal government and basically try to sell Canada to the rest of the world. And what's one of the biggest selling features in the past? It's always been our low corporate rate, and that's just been knocked out the door.
So if you look at the combined corporate state with the Fed and provinces, it's a rounding error between the two now. And for Canada, a small economy, that's risk of having a thicker border with the U.S., I think we have to do a lot better than just sort of get a bit below them. I think we have to go further, and we've got that now, and deficits are cool again. The example being set at the top of the House, and that's discouraging.
Not in an election year. I don't think that's the kind of policy that they believe would get them reelected. They'd be much more inclined to send out another wave of child benefit checks or cut taxes for middle class. I think that's what they see as being their sweet spot.
Well, if that's the case, they don't realize who creates the jobs in this country, but that'd be interesting.